Hi, this is the first episode of my new mini-series in which we'll cover the very last commercial releases for DOS in the respective genres. So, no freeware, shareware, compilations or standalone add-ons will be taken under consideration, only games that were sold upon their initial spawning and only throughout DOS's lifespan. Some you may know as I may have covered them previously, but many will be new and hopefully fun surprises. So, let's get the first one going. Clash is an obscure Polish turn-based fantasy strategy, conceptually inspired by the likes of Heroes of Might and Magic and Warlords. And I have to say that it's one of the most innovative takes on the formula I've seen on DOS, and definitely worth a look. It works on a very finely tuned and well thought out snowball mechanics, meaning that you'll need to fulfill certain sets of consecutive requirements to get your wealth and army power snowball to victory. But getting there will take a while, and we'll cover it in a minute. Or two, cause I'm not sure how long it will take me, to be honest. I'm known for easily drifting off the main subject of conversation into something else, exactly how I'm doing here now. So let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, there was chaos. Chaos in Fantasyland of Karkan, that is. And you, playing as one of the king of provinces of Karkan, must take over the entire land by defeating the opposing factions and fending off the wild tribes invading it. Which does not sound like an especially huge challenge until you realize that you start with a small castle and a few men only. Hardly an army worth the entire country. So, as in most games in a genre, you start by gathering wealth and in this particular case, seeking treasures. Like literally seeking them out and then sending your builders to dig them out. It's hardly a sustainable source of income, even if helpful initially, and especially because digging can unearth some nasty surprises too. Like plagues or curses, so taxes is what you'll mainly be using to keep your kingdom afloat. And keeping those taxes smartly balanced, high enough to bring in decent change but not too high to have your citizens leave you is a key to success. So, you've managed to save up decent money, went to Vegas or fantasy equivalent of Vegas and lost some, and still have a decent spare change left. What can it be spent on, you may wonder? Well, there are things, you know. There's quite a lot of them actually. You can invest it in different kinds of buildings in your castle, which in turn will allow you to recruit different units. You can erect a hospital that heals your wounded, and even school that will let you earn experience. You can naturally spend money to draft armies, which funny enough is not very expensive in itself, but takes a long while for enough men to gather up to form it. And initially you have to pay the quote-unquote licensing fee for a particular type of units to be available. That's not all though, as believe it or not, but you have a wife, and she's a beauty, but also a mini. So she's not the type to agree to look any less presentable than all the other ladies out there. I mean, wearing the same dress twice is a sin. Every young dame knows that. So you'll need to shower her with money too, to keep her content and happy. Or content and willing, but you know, potato, french fries, spot, whatever. Buying her jewelry, horses, hiring personal cooks or servants, there's a lot really. But it's not all without a reason, as more or less every fifth gift that you give her, she gives you a child. Well, she gives birth to your child, but you know what I mean. Let's not split hair here. Especially that split ends cost money and you're already nearing your budget limit. These kids can be assigned to particular armies to lead them and give them passive bonuses, while personally not taking an active part in combat encounters. And while their help is unquestionably important, if they happen to lose in a battle, the enemy will capture and imprison them. You may be able to save them, but they can be tortured in the meantime or even hanged. So the risk is quite high there too. There are over 30 different kinds of units in the game, and each of them is described by stats of attack, defense, experience, speed at which is formed, and cost. An interesting and rarely seen in similar games mechanic of Clash is the tiredness level. All of your units get tired when marching or fighting, and when the level's too high, it's worth to give them a moment to recuperate, as pushing them too hard may cause them to desert from the armies, leaving you defenseless. It's not something I've seen in many games back then, especially turn-based ones, but definitely a welcome addition, as it applies to both your and enemy armies. So playing smart rather than fast may be a better choice. If you think that's all and there's nothing else that could surprise you in Clash, you're mistaken, because there's a lot. When you get to the point when you have a decent army already, a solid chunk of the world map uncovered, well built up castle and some cash and builders to spare, it will be a time to start our snowball rolling. You'll begin with acquiring new castles, either with forts or by building your own, so yeah, you don't have to be a dick to everyone around you straight away, and you can build a few of your own before you start taking theirs too. And while it takes a long while for one to be completed, and it's usually a first target for the enemy armies, when you finally do, moving gold and men to it is a breeze. And the trick here lies in the number. The more castles you have, the higher your tech level is, which allows you to purchase licenses for better units and intake more gold from taxes. So having many castles, full treasury and a happy wife that will provide you with many offsprings is how you win the game. I realize that I've not mentioned battles yet, and they're crucial in a game like Clash. They naturally happen whenever two armies meet or one of them is storming a castle or other defended location, and they take place on separate battle screens, same as in Heroes of Might and Magic. These screens are considerably bigger than in a more well-known classic, however, and also scroll. So there's an added element of extra tactics in combat, being able to split your armies and attack from few flanks, if the map allows for that naturally. All in all, I stand by what I said initially, so Clash is an interesting and often overlooked game that would have gotten much more attention if it released a few years earlier, cause as the very last DOS turn-based strategy, it's too little too late. After barely escaping the evil Tomato, a ruler of all things tomato in the universe, our three heroes came back home and carried on living their Viking lives as if nothing had ever happened. And you gotta kinda get that, cause back then an average lifespan was around 30-40 years tops, and whomever crossed a 4-0 mark was instantly touted an elder that knew more than the rest of the entire village combined. I mean, when we had no antibiotics then, and most diseases were cured with either balms made of piss mud and some random leaves, or sometimes ritualistic dances on drugs, a rusty nail sticking out of a plank somewhere was as dangerous to one's life as an army of enemies. Maybe more, cause you can actually run away from the enemy army. Anyway, they were all home, having the time of their lives, raiding, killing and setting enemy villages aflame or whatever the else Vikings do, never missing dinner. Well, for that matter, breakfast either, but lunch was something that could be skipped during those long sea escapades. Until one day Tomato came back, appearing seemingly out of nowhere and sending his robotic guard to capture our trio and send them to the arena. Fortunately, his battery failed or whatever, perhaps Windows Vista failed to update and he stopped in his tracks. So being as crafty as they are, our trio dismantled him into pieces and wear those as their armors now, each of the pieces granting them new abilities. If the story ended here though, we would have no game to play, so naturally something else must have happened, and it did. All three Vikings have been mysteriously transported through time again, and once more have to fight their way through the unknown lands to get back home. Lost Vikings to Norse by Norsewest is a much less known game than its predecessor was, at least on PC, so that we're clear that I'm not talking about consoles, as it performed quite well there actually. For the most part, same as the original, Lost Vikings 2 is a puzzle platformer, and identically to its predecessor, our protagonists have to get home, pushing relentlessly through dozens of enemies filled, puzzle-locked of platforming stages, utilizing their skills to solve the levels and progress further. This time, however, Eric the Swift, Olaf the Stout and Balog the Fierce are joined by two new heroes, Sofang the Werewolf and Scourge the Dragon. Odd additions, but whatever, such is the case of sequels made by different developers. 3 out of 5 of these are predetermined for each stage and are chosen in a way that would require all of their skills to contribute to solving all the puzzles included. To complete a level you need to find and collect 3 required items and deliver all your Vikings, well, and slash or creatures to the exit. If any of the characters dies, the level is unwinnable and will require a restart. That said, you have to do it manually, as the game allows you to keep going even if you can't complete the level anymore, so that you could familiarize yourself with the layouts, puzzles and better prepare for the second attempt. Or third, or fourth, or fifth, cause you know, some of these can really punish you if you don't know them by heart. Generally speaking, the levels are nearly as well designed as in the original and are easily as tough if not tougher too. So if you're someone who's fast to quit, it may not necessarily be a game for you. On the flip side, figuring out those more complicated stages feels really rewarding, so if not for anything else, it can be worth persevering just for that. And now, I'll tell you what I don't like about the game. As believe it or not, there is one thing actually, and it's graphics. I feel that first outing's pixel presentation aged way better than pre-rendered Donkey Kong Country looks of the second. Some like it, I don't, today that is, but wasn't a big fan of it back then either. Final Impact is a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up and a truly unexpected game to be the last release in the genre for DOS, especially that I've never played it myself. To this day that is, cause now I have. If you played any of the DOS classics like Tyrian or Raptor, you'll feel right at home in Final Impact. Well, with a small conceptually but rather large gameplay-wise difference, in Final Impact you can actually shoot in the same way you would in Swift, so in all 8 directions and not just upwards. I mean, that requires you having an appropriate weapon, one that has a turret mode built in, but it's there in the game and it's usable. So when you have it, Final Impact feels different than most other games in the genre. Since we're on the weapons, there's over 30 different ones, stronger, weaker, spread, narrow, explosive, homing, you name it. There's a lot, and they're all fun to find, learn how to use and master. They can be picked up same as in most games in the genre or purchased between the missions for money earned while playing. You can carry more than one at a time and switch between them at will, but each of 3 available ships have the weight limit, which has to be kept in mind. The game is composed out of 11 unique levels that are rather nice looking and sporting a very impressive parallax scrolling, which would be considered jaw-dropping 5-6 years earlier, but in 1998, even if decent, it was outdated at best. Sounds and music are fine and fit all the on-screen action, but they're nothing out of ordinary and don't stand out from the genre standard. The difficulty? Well, the difficulty is arcade perfect, even if Final Impact never actually graced the arcades. And what I mean by that is that the game is rather demanding, and the default control scheme does not help with that challenge either. At all, in fact, and I would recommend reconfiguring the keyboard controls as soon as you start the game, as what's included by default is not great. I mean, what you're looking at is me failing time after time at it and not being able to go through a single stage, regardless which of them I've picked. I mean, I know I've not played it before, but how can one just keep failing like that all the freaking time? How? Never mind. If you're better than me, then it's a pretty fun shoot 'em up, last commercial release on DOS, and a title definitely worth checking out. Oh, and I nearly forgot, of course it has a story too. But it's your typical mumbo-jumbo about the alliance of hostile aliens, here named Exaras, conquering the so-called core sector of space, sector where naturally Earth is located, and you having to lead the Final Impact squadron against them to regain the freedom of humanity. Nothing deep, but plenty enough motivation to justify all the shooting. Also, not many people know this, but I too was once a Final Impact squadron pilot until I took a blaster shot to the knee. Earth 2140 is a Polish post-apocalyptic themed futuristic real-time strategy, and a pretty decent last DOS RTS effort at that. If you like those, that is. I don't, so you know, I'll try to stay as objective as I'll manage to, but may not be overly excited when talking about it. So, believe it or not, but in the year 2140, Earth is in ruin. On a side note, going by what's currently happening in the world, I deem it to be a very plausible future. It was partly caused by numerous environmental catastrophes, partly because of the countless wars we've waged over the years, though with my personal predictions of the end I would probably want to shave off 80 to 100 years of that very optimistic estimate in the game's title. The reason, however, for Earth being the way it is in the game is irrelevant really. Point is, it is a shadow, a shell of its former self, and the remaining humans gathered up, joined into 2 major factions and moved underground, where it was still safe to live. So, you could say that all the humans are mole people in 2140. Anyway, all that remains are the United Civilized States and Eurasian Dynasty factions, both fighting for whatever the scraps of remaining usable land there still is. Earth 2140 features 2 campaigns, one for each side, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with the variety of missions that they offer. Cause while the general formula of mining resources, erecting structures, then building units and sending them to battle will still apply here, some missions have very creative and, dare I say it, fun objectives. There's over 30 of these missions, each site has around 10 types of buildings and 30 kinds of units. They're all different and unique to their side. Oh, and some of the units are huge mechs, which are always fun to see in action regardless of the type of the genre of the game in question. In late game, many of the units can be disabled with use of ion technology and then converted to your site with a special repair vehicle, which, while perhaps unnecessary, is a fun addition. Interestingly enough, Earth 2140 brings some interesting changes to the standard RTS formula. And while you can queue units for production, you cannot recover credits when you cancel the recruitment and cancel buildings either. So those that you have no use for just stand there alone and abandoned, reminding you of how wasteful humanity really is. Additionally, all buildings apart from the construction center, which is self-sustainable, require power to work. So your base building efforts make you equalize the power plant's outputs with power usage needs for everything to run smoothly. What Earth 2140 was best known for, however, other than the graphics, which I'll get to in a moment, is the difficulty. And it's astronomical. I mean, not only because the game is rather fast and doesn't wait for sleepy or neurotic gamers to catch up, but also because of AI being pretty smart. They will often attack you from few flanks at once or try to pull you into a trap, and it's honestly not unusual to be as pleasantly surprised by their tactical choice as terrified of how well they're pulling it off. Presentation-wise, Earth 2140 is, or was, fantastic. The units are clearly distinguishable, uniquely looking and behaving, all very nicely and smoothly animated, regardless if they're moving, attacking or idling. The shots and explosions are well telegraphed too, and it's not uncommon to have parts of the screen entirely covered in fire and smoke during some of those larger combat encounters. Sounds are as good, with all weapons and units having their own high-quality clickety-clackety sounds, and explosions sounding appropriately bassy. If you like RTSs, this one's definitely not to skip. Gates of Skeldal is the last fully commercial traditional RPG released on DOS, and it's an obscure Czech dungeon crawler that originally released in Czech only, severely limiting its exposure to the international audiences. Fortunately, it was made freeware in 2007, opening its source code to the public, which resulted in numerous fun translations to English. Today, it can be found in playable form online or enjoyed on Android and iOS, as ports to the mobile platforms have been released too. The game is set on an ancient island of Rovenland, island that's magically enchanted by the gods that rested there for a while after they created the world eons earlier. Now, what gods do for R&R is hard to tell, but it must have been something nasty, as there's magic goo everywhere and the island emanates with magical aura all throughout it. When the game begins, however, centuries later, things are not well. 5 evil mages residing on the island joined powers, breaking the Ghostbusters and public urinals law of so-called preventable stream crossing, and work their way towards opening of the gate to forbidden dimension of Zohar. And in Zohar, all kinds of nasty reside. Demons, monsters, undead, my boss's wife, vampires, you name it. Everything that's nefarious and evil is there and waiting to be released. The mages hide within the Skeldal tower, that they filled with monsters to defend it from those who might want to prevent them from succeeding. Since there's no one powerful enough to stop them, elderly scholar and former archmage Fregiar summons 3 heroes as the last means of preventing the catastrophe. But as he does just that, he underestimates the strain it will take on him and dies in the process. The 3 heroes are later joined by another 3 to form a full-fledged party of badasses and last chance of humanity to try to stop the evil casters from potentially destroying the world. Pretty cool start to an even cooler game, don't you think? The 3 heroes are obviously the characters that you create initially and can come in 4 different classes of fighter, wizard, thief and ranger. You can however create interesting dual classes mixes by moving the class alignment dot over the octogram split in all 4 during character creation. The choice influences the number of attribute points you'll have to split between the 4 main stats of strength, magic, agility and dexterity. And while initially a mixed class character may not be as good as one of the fully committed to one craft is, their shared proficiencies may come in handy later on. Secondary statistics like weapon skills, defense or experience cannot be set up in character creation but will change during gameplay. As most good dungeon crawlers, Gates of Skeldal features a decent mix of combat and puzzling, and for purposes of both your party can actually be split. All because some of the puzzles may require interacting with objects and levers in different places at the same time, and also because surrounding the enemy during combat and beating them to a pulp from all sides like some kind of a medieval fantasy goons may yield much more favorable results. Now, I'm not saying that you'll be dividing your party constantly or often even, but it's worth to keep in mind that you can. Especially when you find yourself in a situation in which you won't know why you can't solve a particular puzzle while seemingly doing everything right or facing challenging enemies. Combat is turn-based and good, cause I'm sick and tired of fighting with the interfaces or control schemes of games as much as I do with the enemies, and having time to carefully plan out my strategies is something I actually enjoy. It's a bit of a double-edged sword though, as encounters are rather long, so if you don't appreciate games in which a single combat can take minutes, Gates of Skeldal may not be something down your alley. There's a whole land of Rovenland to get through before you even set foot near Skeldal, and it's split into smaller interactive sections between which you have to travel. So it's not an entirely open world experience. Towns that you'll find and visit are quite fun too and filled with NPCs. With some of them you'll even be able to trade and haggle. And the locations, generally speaking, don't feel empty and devoid of life as some of those found in earlier dungeon crawlers did. While sounds and music are rather decent, it's the graphics that are the star of the show here. And while they're not on the same level as in the biggest RPGs of 1998, especially those released on Windows, they're rather nice, detailed and fun. Yes, fun is the right word. As apart from detailed backgrounds, the enemies are often funky and weird looking, which in my books is always a plus. To summarize, Gates of Skeldal is a very good last effort for DOS and a game worth experiencing even today. Or especially today, cause you'll actually understand what and why you're doing. While undoubtedly some games in this new series are bound to be ones I've covered before, cause I can't really pick which were the last ones, they just were, there will also be some new ones and never spoken about on this channel in the series too. There were 3 in today's video for instance, so not bad. Anyway, I feel that one way or another, it will be fun learning about cutoff points for each of the genres on the platform, not necessarily as the best that it could offer, but perhaps more as a goodbye from the devs before moving to Windows. What do you think of today's picks though? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.